Hello everybody and welcome to the Daryl Talks podcast. We've got a first again today. We've got a return guest. He is back with the second of his books. We have got the author, David Phillip.
Back by despite popular demand.
That is exactly right. I asked Dave, he wanted to make sure that I put this in the podcast because he was worried that he thought his constant nagging and badgering and turning up at my house at late hours was a bit too much.
It was on the way home from work. How many times do I need to tell you?
How are you, Dave? You all right?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, really good.
It's been 16 episodes since we last did this, I think, isn't it?
It actually has. So this is going to be the 20th episode.
Mate, that's mad.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit nervous because I've never planned to do a second episode, so I don't really know how it's going to go.
Like, even if we have enough to talk about.
So, before we start, I know you've been here before, but we're still going to do icebreaker questions because I quite like them and I quite like putting you on the spot. So, the first question is a hypothetical one. You are a superhero and your superpower is your best skill. What would your superpower be?
For probably making shit up.
Making shit up.
Like making up stories. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that. I think I do have quite a creative mind, so I'd probably say something creative. Yeah.
So how would you put that to use?
I don't know. Maybe I'd be really good at creating solutions to problems.
Problem solver.
Oh yeah, there you go. No pressure. It's all kicking off down there. If you could nip down and sort that.
Second question is, if you were to be any fictional character, which one would you be and what sort of chaos would you cause?
So this might be controversial because I think there could be a debate as to whether this character is fictional or not. But it would be...
Please don't say Jesus.
No, I'll give two answers because just in case people are going to get offended by answer one with the fictional term. I think it'd be great to be Thor. Yeah. Actual Thor, God of Thunder, got Mjolnir. You would always get your own way.
And are we picturing Thor as in from the Avengers films and the film series?
No, I think like traditional Thor.
Oh, traditional Thor.
Yeah, I reckon.
Because I mean, I would love to be Hemsworth.
Oh yeah, so would I. But that seems like the obvious answer, doesn't it? So
you'd actually be
just
like
any form of Thor would.
Wow.
I'd be fine with that. If it was the Hemsworth one, ideal. But if it had to be the other one, I'll take it. So my second answer would have been Iron Man because Tony Stark, loads of money. You could essentially again do whatever you want. You don't have to wait, and you're a bloody genius.
And third and final question. If your pet could give you any advice, what do you think it would be?
So, I have two dogs, and I think the thing they get most annoyed about is when it gets to 6:30 and they've got to wait till 7 for dinner. So I think the advice they would give me is, I tell you when I need to eat, not you. Don't make me wait half an hour. I want to eat now. So if I say I'm hungry, feed me.
I sometimes think that, actually, genuinely, because we feed Barry in the morning and in the evening. When I'm sat there stuffing my face at lunch, and he's seen me have my bowl of cereal in the morning.
Yeah.
He's like,
What's this?
What the f-? So last night, we were messaging because I just finished the book, which I managed to read in 3 sittings, which is, like, I'm quite a quick reader anyway, but I was so engrossed at the end that I've never read so quickly because of the tension. Like, I felt like we were like little kids last night. We were so excited.
Yeah, well, you were the first person to like finish and like give feedback and not just like oh yeah, it was good. Like, I could tell that you really got into it and just some of the stuff you said. So like, yeah, that was obviously exciting for me to receive. And
yeah, so it was just, I was so excited when you put out the release date. I was so excited the day that it was there. I was straight on it that morning. I almost set an alarm so that I could buy it first thing and start reading it. That was before I'd even asked you for the episode, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I was like, after the first sitting of reading, I was like, actually, I'm going to do this pretty quickly. Yeah. So that was when I messaged you, like, when are you free? Because I'd all these thoughts in my head
That you needed to get out.
because I'm picking up. I read it differently this time because I read into it a lot deeper and tried to get myself so immersed in it so that I could really give you some proper feedback rather than just the generic stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. I don't know if you remember when we talked about the first book as well. Like I'd said, I think I said it on the podcast. I might not have, but I definitely said it to you at some point. The first book was all about like introducing that world and the people and the characters. So the second book and the third book and the fourth will build on that. But the first book was kind of bringing you into these characters and this world that I've kind of created. I suppose the intention was for people to hopefully read the second book differently because there's familiarity to it, isn't there? And
well, that's exactly it. And then you go and throw like a proper curveball in at the beginning, which obviously I'm not going to go into, but that threw me completely. And I thought that was such a ballsy decision. What made you think, I'm going to just do that?
So I think if you reread book one now, you would see some hints in that towards what was potentially going to happen at the start of book two. Yeah. They were really subtly hidden in.
I think you're right.
So stuff to do with like, I don't know, I don't want to like ruin it, but there's some really small bits. My intention originally, so it's really hard to talk about this cryptically, but the bit that you're on about that happens right at the get-go of the book, and the situation with Brooks originally was only going to last like half the book, but then I decided to maintain it right up until the like big crescendo at the end and then the twist and stuff.
And the whole time through the book, all I'm thinking is, I can't believe he's done this on his second book. And you've added two new characters in. Yeah. You've got Fowler and Braithwaite. Mm-hmm. At what stage did you know it was going to be this storyline?
So I always had this plan. So from when I started book one, I knew exactly where I wanted to go with book two. Originally, the kind of shadows element, if you like, was going to continue into the third book. But I kind of felt it might dilute the second book too much to try and spread it out. I always had this story arc planned, and I knew the characters I want to introduce and the kind of twists and stuff and the way it develops across, you know, everything that happens with the man and the cleaner and stuff like that. So that was always the plan. I've got the plan for book 3, 4 and 5 already like locked in, basically.
I just love the fact that, like we were saying last night, there is so many avenues you can still go down, even after the second book. It's almost built on. And I genuinely preferred the second book because I'd read the first. And I didn't want that to take away from the first book because I really enjoyed that. Yeah. But getting to know the characters, something that you hinted about in the last episode, is gradually coming through, and it definitely shows in the second book. The detail and the storyline of a character that wasn't necessarily a main character in the last book has now protruded. The questions in my mind are, when's he coming back? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is he coming back?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just going to keep me hooked, to be honest.
Yeah. So yeah, it's nice because I think it's like there's the David or Ricky Gervais quote where he talks about the difficult second series. So like whenever he's brought out a show, the second series is always the hardest one because you and it's like I felt that with the book because generally quite positive feedback on book one, and then releasing book two, you want it to be better than book one, but you don't want it to make book one look crap. But you want people to like feel like, yes, this is developed. I enjoyed book one, but book two's like even better now. I'm building on it. So that was like the biggest source of worry for me because it's a pretty tricky situation to be in, isn't it? If you've like done okay with book one and then released book two and people are like, yeah, it's not great. Didn't like that. That was quite a source of worry.
I guess that's going to continue though, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm always hopefully going to write books that people think are good, but I think the book two hump feels, I mean, I haven't finished book 3 yet, but it feels like the big one because you don't want it to be like, oh yeah, book 1 was good, book 2 was crap, so I'm not going to bother with book 3. Yeah. So there's that kind of element. And then I think the other thing which did probably make me more anxious of this one is, and we talked about this on the first podcast, I had quite a few people early read book one. I think it was like 15, 20 odd people before I released it. So I kind of already had a lot of feedback. On this one, I had one, and it was Jess. And we talked about this on the first podcast. Like, she was like, yeah, no, I enjoyed it, but I always have that headspace of, yeah, but you've got to say that.
Yeah.
You know, so I was really worried about that because I had no kind of backing to kind of give me a little bit of confidence putting it out there.
No, and I would have felt comfortable enough, maybe not to mention on the podcast, because that would have been a bit rude, but I would have felt comfortable enough messaging you saying that wasn't for me, or
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that as much.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad it was the opposite way, because it's so much easier to talk about good stuff.
100%.
But
And a massive relief for me.
Yeah. It was just so exciting the whole way through. So did you start writing it as soon as you finished the first?
Yeah, literally. I think I started this one when the first book was with the editor.
Oh, wow.
So because I was like, I remember being in a flow and I knew exactly how I wanted it to start. So I remember I wrote like maybe the first 30, 40 pages like almost straight away. And then I did all the book one release stuff and spent a bit of time focusing on that and then came back to it. And I started book 3 last weekend, maybe.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so just to kind of keep going and keep it.
So you've got that momentum and that sort of virality to sort of, I don't know whether virality was the right word there. It sounds cool.
It sounds cool. Let's go with it. The determination.
The and like the passion to keep going.
Definitely.
So you obviously like your product.
Yeah, I do. I really, not in a big-headed way, but I really like the characters that I've created, and it's like my take on a crime novel and a crime fiction. And you intimate this, like in the second book, there's certain characters that have really grown on me in this book as well, to the point where I'm like, there are some, without giving anything away, that I was originally going to kill off. And I've changed my mind on that now.
No way.
Because I was like, actually, this person, despite it being my creation and it's literally made up, the character has grown on me to a point where I'm like, nah, I want to keep them in. One of the things a lot of people ask about is how it feels if people don't enjoy it and things like that. But I've always had that mindset of, well, it's subjective, isn't it? Like music is subjective, all art is subjective, and the same with books. Some people are going to really enjoy it, some people aren't, and some people look for something different in what they read. All I want to do is to create a story that when you read it, you just enjoy that escape or that moment that you're reading that book and you enjoy that story. You enjoy the journey, and you get to the end of the book and think, yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I always think it's a bit like magic. If you go to a magic show, you can be one of two people. You can be somebody who gets immersed in it and just lets it happen and let it all, and it's amazing. Or you can be a guy watching the hands, and trying to figure out how he did it the entire way through and not enjoy yourself.
Exactly.
Do you think you were in a better headspace writing the second book?
Yeah, I think so. Because obviously we talked, didn't we, on the first one, that I started writing the first one when I was like not in a good place, mental health wise and stuff like that. And I would say, almost a year on from when I suppose started writing the first book, I'm in a much, much better place. And I think I've like learned more about my process as a writer and kind of my style, if you like.
Yeah.
So I like the shorter chapters. I like the idea that you're kind of switching between scenes and the book pieces together as you read through it. I really like that. And in the first book, you have like the flashbacks, don't you? And in this book, there's very specific scenes with one character that are like my flashback scene chapters. And then in book 3, I've got another similar device to like flick between the main story and the sub story. So I think it's just finding that stuff.
Because it just came across like you were more creative.
Yes.
In this one.
Yeah.
And it did make me question, were you in a better headspace so you had more freedom up there? If that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I think so. And I think one of the feedback points that I had from people that read the first book is they kind of wanted more. They wanted more detail. They wanted to know more about certain characters and certain storylines and backstories. the character Holm, Sander, in book one of the bits of feedback I had from one of the readers is they wanted more from him. Well, at the time, I already knew that he plays a bigger part in book 2. So I knew I was going to be building on that anyway. So that feedback, I was like, okay, fair, but wait and see, because that's coming. So sometimes it's reassuring, because from my point of view, if a book leaves you wanting more of a certain character or more about something, then that's good, as opposed to that's too much.
Yeah.
Like,
enough of them. Kill him off.
Stop talking about when they were 5.
Yeah. Sorry, where did you get the names for Holm and Uli? Is it Uli?
Uli, yeah. It's such a weird answer, I think. So I'm really particular about names, so I have to like the name to put it in a book. So there's just certain names, and don't ask me to say any now because I don't want to offend anyone, but there's just certain names I just wouldn't put in. And obviously Sander's Swedish, so I wanted to come up with something actually traditionally Swedish, and then I don't know, probably reminded me of an old football player or some rubbish like that.
Sebastian Veron.
What a man. Literally one of my favourite footballers of all time, weirdly. And people were going to judge me big time for that. Yeah, so that kind of came to it. And then actually accidentally I realised that Sander is from Stockholm and his initials are S. Holm, which is like Stockholm. So that wasn't even intentional. And I only realised that like after I'd brought book 1 out. And then Uli, I think I might have just Googled Swedish women names and then found one I liked.
Fair.
And
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, yeah, like definitely. So yeah, I am quite particular about it. So I've got a list of potential names and stuff that I'll use for the books. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, but there have been times, to be fair, when I've come up with a character name and Jess has been like, "Oh no, you can't have that because you've got too many people with an S surname or too many," and I've gone, fair point. So I think both Fowler and Braithwaite initially were different, but she was like, they're too similar to some like other character surnames.
Did you go footballers again then?
No.
Did you have any struggles writing the story, or?
I don't think I had any like writer's block or anything, because I've always been quite clear on the story. I think it was definitely a slightly different process this time. So obviously the first book I wrote the majority of that when I wasn't working.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, obviously I started a new job, quite a full-on new job. So the writing was a little bit more intermittent as opposed to like huge
How did you
amounts.
find that then?
So that was actually probably... So I did 2 things on this book that I didn't do on the first book. And I'm undecided whether I'll do it again or not. But so I did write, it was more broken up as I wrote. Finding the time to write and the like discipline to write was harder. But I made it this... And I don't really know why I made this decision, but I was like, I'm not going to read what I've written until I finish the book. Then I'm going to read it. So it's my first time reading it, so I can see how the story flows. That was what I thought. Because I thought if I keep rereading it, it's that whole thing, you know, when you're looking at your own work, I'm just going to skim through it and not really pay attention to it. So I wrote it without ever going back and rereading what I'd done. Maybe I'd gone back and checked how did I end that chapter if it had been a week between writing, but I just wrote the book, then I sat down and read it for like the first time. Definitely flukily, it flowed really nicely, and I wasn't like, oh my God, I was worried of it being like a jumbled mess and me being like, oh, this is fucking awful, what have I done? But it worked, and it was really useful because so many more of the like little errors jumped out to me because I wasn't desensitized to what I was reading.
Have you found that you've got a peak time for your like creativity in your mind?
Yeah, annoyingly, when I go to bed.
Really?
Yeah, I come up with so many ideas lying in bed, and I lie there and I think to myself, I hope I remember this tomorrow.
Mine is the complete opposite. I'm at like 4 o'clock in the morning.
So are you a morning person then?
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm that person that's so freaking annoying in the office because I'm like, morning everybody.
Yeah.
And both my children are now.
Oh,
They are like smiley.
I'm
Liz
glad I
hates
don't
life.
work with you
Yep.
anymore. I do make a point about that in book 1, actually, of how much I envy morning people. Because I wish I could be a morning person, but I'm just not. I'm shit until like 10.
But I'm miserable in the afternoon for a little bit.
See, that's when I'm...
Might not be noticeable, but I'm feeling it.
We'd be a terrible couple, wouldn't we?
Yeah, like we'd have no time of happiness.
You literally wouldn't.
Where did you get... I don't think I'm giving anything away here. So the big house. Mm-hmm. There's a big house in it.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I think it had to be something that like matched the circumstances that are like within the story. Course. Obviously, some of that had sort of been described in the first book, I think, in terms of the man. And,
there was
and
all,
like
yeah, there was, yeah. You kind of added some description in there of what it was already like, but like the external bits that you described and the extras.
Like the fountain.
The fountain, exactly.
Do you know what?
Who knew?
It's really weird. And I'm sure there's something wrong with my brain. It must be. Because sometimes these ideas are just like, I'll be writing and describing the grounds of a house or something. And that idea of what that fountain looks like, it's just in my mental imagery. I've not had to think about it. It's just, no, that's what it is. And I remember saying to Jess, like, this is what I imagine. She's like, no, do something more normal. And I'm like, no, because that's what it is in my head. And I see it so cinematography type style in my brain. I'm like, no, that's what it has to look like. I can't. The pub in the first book, that was just the minute I was like, right, there's a pub called the Mill. My head was like, that's what it looks like. And there was no way I was going to have it laid out any other way because it was just there.
But putting that into words, because I can picture these things. Yeah. But if you asked me to rewrite the description of that, it would be like a children's drawing on a fridge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I don't know. Like some of them.
Do you have to thesaurus anything?
Sometimes, yeah, because like it depends how good a writing day I'm having.
Yeah, fair.
So some days I'll write something and I'm like, yeah, all right, that's pretty good. And then other days I'll reread it and I'm like, yeah.
You've got no qualification in like creative writing or anything, have you?
No, I got an AS level in media A. That's as far as my...
Booyah.
That's as far as that goes. I was always all right at English and the creative side of English, but yeah, no qualifications or anything.
No, because I just think for anybody out there who is struggling at school, there are other avenues that you can go down that aren't.
Definitely. Without going like too into it, it's one of the things through work and kind of previous jobs and stuff. Obviously, I worked quite a lot in apprenticeships over the last few years as well. That I think back to like school days and sixth form and the like. It's probably the same when you were there as well. It's all about go to uni. That's like the driver, isn't it? When actually that's not the be all and end all. Like there's so much other stuff out there. But
because I didn't go to uni. I got into uni, but then decided not to because I enjoyed getting paid monthly.
Yeah.
That was literally the only reason. I just really enjoyed the money. Stupid saying it, but if I could go back in time, I would have made the jumps and the decisions that I'm making now. If I would have made them earlier.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If I could go back.
It definitely shapes you. It's shaped me. And for me, I think one of the hardest things maybe 5-6 years ago for me was to stop kind of comparing myself against other people. And just being like, I find what I enjoy and what I want to do, what makes me happy, and not be like, oh, I need to earn loads of money because so-and-so from school doesn't mean that they're happier or any better. Or
Yeah, and I've kind of turned my envy into a hobby now. Yeah. So everybody that I've ever been jealous of because they're successful, I'm like, right, get them on the podcast.
Anyone who's wronged me, I'll just create a character with a really similar name in the book and kill him off brutally.
Oh, Schmarrel Schmumsden.
Yeah.
What made you decide a pseudonym?
Well, it's my middle name, so there was that. And kind of two things, really. One, telling people how to spell Ackrell is a nightmare quite often. So if people are trying to search for me on Amazon and search for my book,
and
that's going to be really hard.
Clever.
Whereas David Phillip is quite easy. Yeah, so that was kind of the basis of it. And also, I think originally I was like, if I do it under David Phillip, if it's really bad, I could just, well, that's not me.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, there's a bit in the book, there's a lot of tension in the air, and something almost happens. Mm-hmm. How would you feel writing a sex scene?
Oh, so yeah. So I thought about this the other day because obviously there is a chemistry, isn't there, between Brooks and Warner? I think that's unhideable, really, and I don't think that's a spoiler. Or if you haven't read the books, though, read them and find out. So, no, I did think about this the other day, but some of my readers are like father-in-law, aunties, uncles, and I then think it feels weird if I've written a sex scene,
So,
and
like,
to
yeah.
know that they're sat there reading that is a bit disturbing to think about too much. I think if I was going to do it, I would write up to the point where it's maybe post-watershed,
Yeah.
and then go to the next bit, to
morning they
leave
wake
the
up.
reader to
Yeah.
determine whether they just had a board game or whether they...
And back on the short chapters bit, my friend Becky, who I walk my dog Barry with,
Yeah.
she said she got the first book.
Oh, cool.
And the first thing she said was, I love it because it's got short chapters. Because on a Kindle, it
Yeah.
tells you how many minutes
Yeah, yeah.
to the next chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes when she's like really tired, she's like, oh God, this is a 15-minute chapter.
Yeah.
Do I, don't I?
Yeah.
Whereas because it's night like 3-4, it keeps her like, oh, I can do a few more minutes.
Yeah. And I get that, and I think as a reader, so most crime books that I've read anyway, generally speaking, they all have shortish chapters. And I find the ones where the chapters are longer, you do kind of lose interest, because you think, well, how long is this? Sometimes it's just filled with pointless backstory, and I'm kind of like, I just want to get to the next bit. So that, again, that's kind of like, for me, what makes a good book is that you want to read the next chapter, you want to turn the pages, you're not willing the end of the chapter to come around because you're like, fuck, this is a bit long.
Have you done anything differently with your sort of marketing of this book? Or have you kept it with the same sort of logic and...
Not yet, but I do want to do more. So I want to spend a bit more time. It's a really like difficult balance, really, because when I dedicate time for book stuff, I'm more like, well, I want to crack on and get the third book out. And then in my head, I'm like, once I've got 3, that's like a nice product base. And maybe I'll take a break from writing and really focus on marketing kind of 3 solid books kind of thing, and invest a bit more time in that. But
Because then it's a trilogy, I guess, isn't it?
yeah, but also it's like when you are trying to sell a series to people, it's hard to sell a series to people if you've written 1 book or 2 books. And then, you know, a lot of the advice I've been given is to try and get, you know, 3 or 4 books per year out for a couple years to build that kind of readership and that following. So working full time, finding time to do hours of marketing research or writing,
Yeah.
it's a toss-up. So I do want to do a bit more. I'm going to try and get myself out to more events and book fairs and things like that as well, just to
That'd be good.
get it out there. And
Introducing yourself to people that read books.
yeah.
That's your market, isn't
Yeah,
it?
well, that's it. Yeah, God, why isn't he doing that already, idiot? So
It's one of those simple things, though, that you don't necessarily... You would skim over that if you didn't sit back and sort of reflect every now and again.
100%. So yeah, I want to do that. I want to work a bit more on promotions and stuff on Amazon and things like that.
Okay.
Other book sites are available. Just to try and get more visibility with the books. And then I'll probably do more on Instagram, so a couple more giveaways and stuff like that. And then I'll probably start to try and dedicate like a budget per month for it.
Oh,
to
wow.
try and really boost it.
That'd be really good.
Yeah. But it's like, I think I mentioned it last time, you kind of gone from the hobby to then a business side, but at the same time you've still got the next hobby bit. So it's just trying to find the right balance, I think.
Including the real life bills to pay.
Yeah, jobs,
Petrol to
dogs,
put in the car.
to walk,
That's
all of that
exactly it.
stuff, and finding time to do. But yeah, so yeah, I do want to do more, but it's like there's so much out there, isn't there?
How are you balancing it then? Like, is it when I can sort of attitude, or are you planning?
So I try to plan and be disciplined with. So typically I work from home 2 days a week. So those days I try to say are writing days because I've got less travel time. I can do an hour after work. I do some at the weekend. I try and do some when I'm like watching the sport or something on telly. So I sit with my iPad and write some stuff. If Jess is away, things like that, I'll just dedicate the whole weekend to it. So that's what I try to do, and I try to set like realistic targets of where I want to be in terms of progress and stuff like that. So yeah, it can be a challenge, and I've like moved different interests around to fit it. So like going to the gym, I try to do that at lunch at work now. So luckily I've got one at work, so I do that instead of when I get home because it buys me a bit more time. So it's all that kind of stuff, just trying to juggle it and fit it in.
No, the reason I ask because I'm horrendous. With every will in the world, I would love to be an organised, planned person.
Yeah, same.
But I cannot do it. If I have too much booked in a day, even if it's a typically normal day, if I wrote that down, I'd be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
Even though I do that every single day.
Totally. I get that. Definitely.
But it works for some people, and I envy them.
But it's also, you have to be in the mindset for it. If you're not like, if you come home from a really hard day at work and you think, I've got to edit tonight and I don't want to, are you going to do a good job of that, or is it going to potentially be a waste of time?
Yeah, I quite like. Whereas last time I was saying it's a right old struggle, and it still is a struggle to find time to do that, especially with complicated audio. But I'm finding ways to make it better. So like setting up better, making sure I've got everything plugged in.
Yeah.
That's a great start.
Yes, always recommended.
Always
Highly
recommended. And I've learned from my mistakes in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's just I think that's great, finding ways to move.
Yeah, and I'm bad for like, if I'm like, I want to make sure I do 5 pages tomorrow, and I've had a rough day, like a big day at work or something, and I get home and I'm quite tired, and then I've walked the dogs, and then I sit down and I can't be asked. I'll do 10 pages tomorrow. I'm quite bad at saying that. And then I get to the end of the week, I'm like, right, I owe myself like 25 pages now.
Right, okay. So then you just sit and bosh it out.
Yeah, essentially, I'd go, right, well, you've had your time off. You need to, if you want to hit your target of getting a book out on XYZ date. But also, you kind of, when you're writing it, you have to kind of want to do it. Because there's definitely parts of both books where I've not enjoyed writing that part. Yeah. And it's usually the parts that are leading up to the fun parts.
Yeah.
Because, it can't be 100 miles an hour for the whole book.
But how did you feel when you finished the second book?
Yeah, always like there's a relief. There's quite a moment of like, bloody hell, I've just written like another book. I've written a whole story.
That's what I was like when you said you were releasing the second book. He's written a whole other book. And one thing I will say, this time I completely skipped over that it's my mate Dave. To me now, and especially after finishing the second book, like when I pick up your next one, you will be all for David Phillip. You won't be my mate Dave's book.
That's really cool.
And that honestly, it's without like kissing your ass too much, that is full dedication to you for putting that effort in.
It's surreal though, isn't it?
It is really weird.
Yeah. There were definitely, again, I really don't mean this to come across like big-headed, but when we were on holiday and I was reading it through for the first time, there were genuinely bits in the book where I would turn to Jess and be like, that was actually quite a good chapter. Like, I really enjoyed that. So yeah, there's always that when I do it. And then this one, when I finished it, was I've not read it at all. So then that kind of worry started. And then I think, without giving it away, the type of story is different to book one, would you say?
Absolutely.
That was a worry. Because I'm like, what if people only enjoyed book one for the almost whodunit type nature of that book? And this book is slightly different to that. So that was a worry. And then one of your comments last night that was like huge relief was, the question I've asked the most is is there enough in the book for it to be interesting enough? Like, is there enough in there in terms of things that happen in the story? And you said yesterday, like, you know, the tension and the build up and so much, all the action, you know, that kind of stuff was like, oh, good. Because I had like threats off of friends' mothers and stuff about the cliffhanger of book 1 and the fact that they had to wait for book 2. So I thought it'd be nice.
Do you know what? That is the only ball ache.
Yeah.
Is the fact that we've got to wait
Yeah, I
for
know.
book 3 because I'm enjoying it so much and I'm proper in the rhythm.
Yeah.
And I guess this is probably a pressure that you have, is that you want to keep the rhythm for the people that are enjoying it and feeding back.
Absolutely. And that's where it's like, you'd love to be able to do it full time.
Yeah,
because then I could churn out, you know, another book in 3 months or something.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the goal, and it's a slow burn, isn't it? Because it's about building enough books into the series that new readers have a bunch to read at one go. And
hypothetically, if there was a job advert that said crime series author, would you apply for that job?
yeah, probably I'd just send them my books.
Yeah, but you see what I mean? Like, some like, I kind of feel like the struggle is actually all part of the fun of it.
Definitely, it gives you an appreciation of it, doesn't it? And like, yeah, like you understand what goes into it, so you know. And I read other books differently now, I think, because you read it and you go. So I was talking about those Dexter books earlier, and I've read them and I think actually the way these are written is beyond clever. It's mind-blowingly clever how this book has been written, and I might not have really appreciated that had I not written a book before. And you think, yeah, that's tiers above what I could produce. Like,
yeah, but then that's something to aspire to.
100%, yeah. But it goes back to what you said earlier about finding your style and what works for you, isn't it? Like,
and sticking with it. Yeah. One thing that's like proper resonated in my brain now is to just keep going. So do you have like a favourite part of the book?
So my favourite bit about this book was when I finally came up with the ending. So building up to it, and then when that idea came to me of how I wanted to end this book, I felt like it was like Christmas Day. I was so satisfied with how it was going to play out and what the ending was going to be. I was like in two minds whether I was going to tell anyone, like, you know, Jess, and explain it to her, because I just wanted her to read it for the first time and be like, oh my God. And that for me was the bit that was like the best bit for this one.
So like we said about the whole character things, because you've built up some really, really strong characters. Do you ever see a potential for like a spin-off?
Yeah.
Because I've got one in mind, but I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
Because I really, really want people to make their own decisions.
Yeah, definitely. So there's one I think isn't a giveaway. So there is a recurring character in both books, which is Holm, and I touch a bit more on his backstory in book 2. In my head, originally, I was always going to float that idea somewhere along the line as to whether there would be an interest in a Holm book, kind of maybe a bit more about his life in Sweden before joining the Elmore force. And then, yeah, the other character you're on about, possibly. And then I think as well, I'd consider something completely standalone as well. So away from the series, just a different one-off story of some kind.
Oh wow!
Yeah, just to have something different, I suppose. And
Christmas special.
Christmas special, yeah, but like something completely removed from Books and Warner, possibly somewhere along the line as well.
Do you think you'd still stick to crime?
Probably.
Or would you go to erotic?
For
the in-laws.
Yeah, for the post-watershed reads. No, I don't. I think write what you kind of know and are familiar with, and I don't read that type of book.
Yeah, understood.
So, yeah, it probably would be crime or maybe a bit more drama. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely
How
think.
How dark would you want to go?
Well, and this is the like interesting bit. So original plot line for Brooks before it became Brooks and Warner was gonna be a lot darker, and the development of his character was gonna become increasingly darker. But then as the like characters developed as I wrote the first book, I kind of thought, I don't know if that's going to work for this. So I might still use that idea with a new character. and have a bit more of a almost anti-hero type character potentially.
So, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you back, and I cannot wait to do a Christmas episode with you after the release of the next book. No pressure, mate.
Yeah, no pressure.
Get right in. I'm sorry I've kept you so long. You could have probably done a couple of pages by now.
Maybe. No,
and
pleasure.
I'm sure everyone's going to love the fact that we've caught up again.
Yeah.
And that I'm in a position where I can do a second... we're on episode 20.
I know.
And it is madness that it's been that long since you were last on. So there we have it, just another great episode. Thank you so much again, Dave, for coming on and taking the time of your evening to sit with me. Guys, if you are enjoying the series, please keep sharing, keep talking, and let me know what you're thinking of it. Cheers.